What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All NBA Show, part of the All City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Matez. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler, the man that's always driving or flying 5 hours this way or that way. Thanks. How you doing today?
I'm good, and that's going to be my last really long drive for a while. I thought it was my last day of the season for either being in New York, D.C., or Bristol for ESPN's. That's on the books as of now. I've got some Vegas stuff to do for them for Summer League, but that's it. And actually, Adam, as I walked out of there today, and as I do every year, my contract's been up since I've been at ESPN. You always wonder, is this the last time I'm walking off campus? You just never know after 23 years of that being a second home. So I did that last night, and that was my last long drive for a while.
Well, I doubt it. I think we're going to get more legs. At least I'm praying and hoping we're getting more legs on all these platforms. But certainly on this one, we are in free agency. We've had 2 full days of free agency now. We're in day 3, so we've got plenty to talk about. And on today's show, we're going to talk about the Dallas Mavericks adding Klay Thompson and a couple other pieces that I actually really like. In fact, Legs, one of my guys was traded to the Dallas Mavericks. We'll talk about him on the other side. We'll also do the 76ers who get Paul George. Are they the best big 3 in the league now? We'll talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oh, man, this is all my guys. I might be the star of the show today, Legs. Hartenstein going to Oklahoma City. You can guess how I feel about that.
Yeah, no kidding. He's closer to you geographically. I think that's a good thing for you. Yeah,
I might have to make the drive. And then the Orlando Magic get KCP. We'll go there as well. But we're going to start with our Dallas Mavericks. Klay Thompson is leaving. Oh my! A little spite and resentment, a little cold after such a phenomenal, one of the all-time runs with that Golden State Warriors team. He is headed to Dallas, completely different type of team. Naji Marshall will be going as well from New Orleans, who's an interesting prospect. And then my guy, Quentin Grimes, who is definitely at the top of my second draft list. Guys who have not panned out yet, but I think are poised to pan out coming up. Those 3 guys are in. Out the door is Josh Green, Derek Jones Jr., and Tim Hardaway. So, all right, let's start with Klay Thompson here, Legs. What do you just make of the fit with the Dallas Mavericks? Is he going to fit in there, and how different a style do you think it's going to be for him making that adjustment?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you put that in your question because that's kind of how I'm feeling about this. Well, let's just start with the fact that obviously this is a significant upgrade over the guys that are asked to spot up around Luka and Kyrie and make shots. And you could see the disparity in the finals last year. You know, when you have that kind of disparity from the 3-point line, very difficult to win in this league. And the guys that they had sort of filling that role were just not consistent enough up and down the board. And a lot of those guys are gone. Josh Green is a guy that I talked about repeatedly during that series. He plays hard and he defends and all that. And he had a decent year shooting the ball from the 3, but he did not shoot the ball well in that series. And he had good, clean looks. Tim Hardaway Jr. obviously had an injury late, and they kind of took him out of the rotation. He never really made it back in. Derek Jones Jr. was a very valuable player for them. But again, you know, and even just looking at his mechanics, that's not a pure shooter spotting up off the ball. No. You just brought in one of the purest shooters that's ever lived. And look, I'm still confident Klay Thompson is going to shoot a high percentage from the 3-point line. What's going to be different for him is the fact that there's going to be nothing coming really for him out of movement.
Yep.
Other than running the floor into transition, he'll get those. He'll get, you know, throw aheads or the ball's pushed and he kind of trails into one. He'll get some of that, but he's not going to get the stuff he was getting in Golden State with that involved off the ball movement with multiple players, the curl action he would run, and then he would come out the other side off a pin down, like the post split action that he was so good at reading. He's not getting any of that. It's going to be really your old traditional stand, spot up, and wait. And so I'm very interested to see how that affects Klay Thompson's rhythm, because it is going to be a totally different feel, because that's what Dallas does. They're going to run high ball screen. They're going to run ISOs. That's what they do all the time. So, and look, I will say the ball will find you. I mean, Luka's gonna get you the ball, and they've got other pieces with their lob threat that require people to pinch in. So, like, those kick out passes are gonna be there. Klay's gonna get his share. Who knows? Maybe for his stage of his career, Adam, with what he's been through physically, maybe this is exactly what Klay Thompson needs. Like more shots where he's kind of already standing there set and not moving into the flow of the shot, because in Golden State, they never really changed that for him once he came back from all these injuries. He just kept playing the same way, but the ball wasn't going in nearly as often when he was on the move. So this might be the best thing that could happen to him, but it's going to definitely be an adjustment. And as I said at the very beginning, the bottom line is this is a massive upgrade in terms of expectations and accuracy on those shots, that there are a lot to be had in a given game with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving playing together. So I totally get why Dallas wanted them. It's a little bit of a sad thing for me. It's one of those pairings, Klay and Steph, Adam, that you kind of wanted to see if they could be one of that rare tandems that spends their whole career together. And maybe if they don't go out the same year or whatever, but close to it. But regardless, only wear one uniform because they're so synonymous with each other, and the Splash Brothers and all of that. And now Klay's in a different uniform, man, different city, and less money. And it's interesting, that he made that decision and what was going through his head. I haven't heard really talk about it yet, but it's a sad day, I think, for the Warriors organization. I think for fans in general, it's a little bit weird because I know that's a dying breed, but you thought maybe this would be that pairing that could do that. That's not going to happen now. Klay moved on, and now we see what impact he has on Dallas. I think it'll be significant, but it's going to be an adjustment for sure.
Let's put the Warriors piece of this to the side for a second. I do want to come back to it. You talked about the lack of player movement, and some teams are very stagnant. Some teams move the ball or moved players around a lot. Golden State was the far extreme of the player movement part. Dallas is a far extreme to the other thing. Their guys stand in the corner and they wait. Luka breaks down the defense. He collapses it, and then the shots are open. Do you think, though, that Dallas – because I wonder this with Denver, too. Denver can be very stagnant. Even though they run the dribble handoff game and they do a bunch of stuff picking the dribble handoff, Michael Porter, KCP formerly, was in the corners, and they just kind of stood there. They weren't running off of pin downs and a whole bunch of action. Do you think Dallas would be smart to work some of that into their offense? Or do you think because you have Luka, you don't need to?
No, I think they definitely should. I just don't think they ever will. It's the same. It's the same thing, and that I would say about James Harden all those years in Houston. The possessions James Harden wasn't initiating or wasn't the primary driver of the offense. I mean, go back and look at the film. He'd stand out by the logo basically with his hand on his hips. You're not going to get him because what it requires, Adam, is everyone being willing to move without the ball. Now, they can run some specific hitting action for Klay that they don't run now for anybody else because they don't have that kind of personnel. A little bit of this they ran for Tim Hardaway Jr. when he was healthy and in rhythm and he was playing well. They would run some action specifically for Tim Hardaway Jr., where he would maybe do some screen-to-screener action where he'd set a pick, then come off a pick and running into a shot off a down screen toward the top of the key or up to the elbow. They'd be smart to include some of that for Klay, so he's not totally at the mercy of a team face guarding him or just saying, hey, no help responsibility. We're going to stay home with Klay Thompson and still dare the ball to be funneled to whoever else that guy is, whether it's PJ Washington or whoever's on the weak side of the court. Let the ball get funneled there. We're going to stay chest to chest with Klay. Like, you can't just allow him to be guarded that way all the time. So I think they should put in some sets specifically designed for Klay Thompson to get some stuff off the move. But in terms of a general philosophy about their offense, I just don't think that's ever going to change because of the style that Luka wants to play. And that Luka's been very successful to this point in his life playing. Very hard to get those guys to buy in to a different style where they don't have it as much. And by the way, they're willing to move too, because that's what it takes. You can't just have a guy say, okay, you know what? Fine. I'll give the ball up a little bit more earlier and see if we can get the ball hopping around, but I'm not going to move. No, it doesn't work. Doesn't work because you require those five defenders to be moving and communicating, right? Yep. And that's what it's all predicated on. You have to force communications on screens and switches and hedges and all of that stuff. And if you're not willing to move and you're the most important player on the team, then it's just not going to be something that's going to flow. So Be interesting to see what they do differently, specifically for Klay, but I don't think stylistically you're going to see much of a change.
Well, I think even the word you use there is they could put in some sets. And that's different than what the Warriors did. The Warriors had sets, but more than anything, they had continuity offense. They had read and
Right.
react. And that's where, when you talk about the ball getting popping, that's where that happened, is because, okay, this action led to that one. And some of the most iconic Warrior sequences, and really it was a thing we saw in their heyday. We would see it every game, a handful of times, where it was just one action into the next, into the next, into the next. The next thing you know, Klay Thompson's wide open above the break with 8 seconds to set his feet and shoot it. And I just don't think that's not a trait you can even say, oh, we want to add that to our game. It's easier said than done. That has to be a complete overhaul of your identity. And I just don't see that happening at all as well. That being said, I think Klay Thompson's a great enough shooter that if he's comfortable with it, he'll be able to get set shots somewhat frequently. Here's a question for you, though. He took 15 shots a game, second leading field goal attempt taker for the Warriors last year. Luka, 24 a game. Kyrie, 20 a game. Behind them last year was Tim Hardaway Jr. at 12.5. So if you just knowing that, the third leading shooter was 12.5, and below that, PJ Washington, 10.5. What would you guess Klay Thompson's field goal attempts is going to be per game next year?
Definitely not going to be 15. I'd almost put good money on that. It's not going to be 15.
Yeah.
It's coming down off his number in Golden State, probably somewhere in that 12 range, I would imagine. I mean, 10's not enough, for a guy like Klay Thompson. So 12's a good number. And you got to remember, like, he never was a super high volume free throw shooter, but he's not going to get hardly any free throws going forward. These are all going to be, I'd almost predict 70% of his shots are going to be catch and shoot threes. That's what it's going to be for the remainder of his career, most likely. Now, there's another component to this. I think Klay Thompson is not the defender that he was at his peak, clearly. And a lot of that has to do with the injuries and age. You slow down a little bit. The injuries probably took a toll. His reaction time in being able to laterally slide or backpedal, stop, and a fraction of a second after the offensive player decides to shoot it, react, extend, and contest. Like that reaction time is slower for Klay Thompson. That's what I've noticed over the last couple of years. But I'll say this, he's still an excellent defender. And he's big. He slides his feet well. He's able to get shoulders squared on guys that are trying to penetrate on him. He just doesn't react as well when guys then separate from him. That reaction time to then extend forward and contest, he just doesn't have the impact that he used to. He's still a better defender than Tim Hardaway Jr. There's no question in my mind. So they pick up that added bonus. He's bigger and he's just better. His instincts are better. I think he cares more about it. So there's going to be also a marginal increase there. Now, certainly I don't think he's necessarily in the category of a Derrick Jones Jr. right now, athletically and quickness wise. Josh Green, I don't know, probably somewhere in the Josh Green territory, but he's certainly better than what they got out of Tim Hardaway Jr., who played most of those minutes in the regular season at that spot. So there's an increase there. His shot numbers are going to come down overall. The quality of the shots could actually go up because I felt like Klay Thompson was continuing to play like Klay Thompson of 5 years ago and taking really difficult shots. And I would say it about him on a nightly basis, like, man, he'd be struggling and he'd come out and right off the bat, take a dribble handoff where he's falling out of bounds in the right corner. And I'm like, man, that's a tough way to start your night because he's still thinking about, like, he can do these things. And he just can't at such a high level. Well, this offense is not going to even allow for that. So the quality of shots and the number of shots he takes on balance will be better. I just need to see to what extent are teams able to just stay home with him and the movement that he used to use to create space, because he doesn't need much time. You know that. He's got the quickest catch and releases we've ever seen, and he's 6'7". But that was predicated off movement and a guy getting there half a count late when he'd come off that last screen. Well, now he's going to be standing in one spot most of the time. So can teams just say, we're not rotating off of this? Now, obviously, the lob threat plays into that. You're only so many lob dunks you're going to give up before that weak side corner guy says, you know what, I got a pinch. And now here goes a kick out to Klay. This is all going to be something that's going to take some time to evolve for them. And I'm fascinated by it. I love it for Dallas. I really do. This is obviously an upgrade of just a pure shot-making capability of that spot. And they really need that.
Another guy that they got that I really love is Quentin Grimes. I mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, the move they got is basically you lose Josh Green, you add Quentin Grimes. They're very similar. I think Grimes a little bit smaller, and you could see this here: Klay Thompson, Naji Marshall, Quentin Grimes. You lose Josh Green, Derek Jones, Tim Hardaway Jr. But Quentin Grimes, I want to start here because he's a guy that I like his jumper. I like his 3-point shot. He's quick. He has a quick trigger on it. Almost to where the Knicks, I think, had to tell him, to scale down a little bit, but he makes his threes. He's a willing shooter. He can get hot, but he also plays with a almost reckless level of intensity. He's a good defender. I think he's a guy that didn't work out in New York. The biggest red flag to me is he seems like a guy Tom Thibodeau should love, and he didn't work out there. So that's the biggest red flag to me. But he's a guy that I look at and I go, okay, 3-and-D. You replace Josh Green with what I think is going to be a better 3-point shooter. I think he's a guy that could have a bounce back in Dallas. What did you think of that move?
I thought it was a sneaky good move for Dallas. Now, I will say this. Quentin Grimes, you're right. He does defend. He's active. He's 6'5", so he's got pretty good size for that spot. I'll say this. For me, the ball's never gone in at a consistent enough rate from the 3-point line. So let's see. I mean, I think he's 37 for his career. That's not horrible, but he's never been over 40 ever in 5 years in the league. He's never been over 40%. So let's see if he can do that now with the type of shots we're talking about. That may be a little bit higher quality where he's got a little bit more time. Because that's one thing about Luka. He puts the ball across the floor with such velocity and accuracy that you do typically when you are going to, open enough to take a shot, it is a little bit more uncontested than what you're used to. And that helps guys that are marginal 3-point shooters. And I think he's got to show me he can be better than that. His best for his career was 38% his first year in the league, and then 38, 33, 36. Very small sample size last year, 6 games with Detroit. So that's nothing counts. But so he's in that mid to upper 30s. Let's see if he can improve on that and be a little bit more consistent when the shot quality is better and the ball's getting to you faster and more accurately, as it will with Luka.
I mean, it's kind of the same career percentage as Josh Green. Quentin Grimes took roughly 8.5 to 9 per 36 minutes. Josh Green about 4.5. So Quentin Grimes is just such a more willing shooter. And I think the willingness to be a shooter, even if you're the same percentage, the willingness to be a shooter is so big playing with Luka, because you need guys that if they have the daylight, if Luka threw the pass, it's because he thinks you're open. You've got to be willing to shoot it. You can't record scratch on those because that can clog up the offense. So I just like him. I would not be surprised if he has a career year there. And if you look at Klay Thompson replacing Tim Hardaway Jr., okay, I like that. Quentin Grimes replacing Josh Green, I like that. And the last piece here is you basically look at Naji Marshall replacing Derek Jones Jr. This is the one I'm not so sure about. I just love what Derek Jones Jr. provided them. Naji Marshall is thicker, tougher. I don't know how he fits in here. What did you think of that move?
I like Naji Marshall a lot, man. He's got a lot of dog in him, and he's a big, strong dude. He likes to mix it up. He gives them a level of toughness. I loved what Derek Jones did for this team. Make no mistake about it. His energy that he brought every night, I thought he was a perfect fit with his ability to slash and catch lobs, and then defensively, but he's a little bit more wiry. Naji Marshall's built like a tank. Naji Marshall, I think, can guard certain types of players that Derek Jones Jr. could not. As far as the shooting, I don't think there's going to be much of a difference there. They're both streaky. They're capable of making shots. I think Naji Marshall's probably got a little bit better just mechanics, but it doesn't go in. It goes in at about the same rate as Derek Jones Jr. There's a trade-off. I think Derek Jones Jr. is better off guarding some of the quicker guys that can change direction with a live dribble. I think he could do a better job of turning his hips and keeping those guys in front. But I think Naji Marshall would be more equipped to guard a guy, say, like Jaylen Brown, if they find that matchup again, because Jaylen Brown he likes to hit you with that shoulder a couple times before he tries to go. Naji Marshall is more equipped for guys like that, guarding, a LeBron James type of player. Naji Marshall is going to give you a little bit more there in terms of the strength and just physical toughness. So overall, I think it's a slight upgrade for Dallas, because I think the physical profile lets you guard, I think, more types of guys than Derek Jones Jr. was able to. And the shooting, to me, is a wash.
So let's take a break now. Tomorrow, I'm not going to ask the big picture, which is, did the Mavericks get a lot better or this or that? We're going to save it for tomorrow, where we're going to really talk about all the teams that were aggressive in free agency. Dallas is as aggressive as anybody, outside of Philadelphia. They made a bunch of moves, and we'll talk about that tomorrow on the show. But now let's take a break. On the other side, we'll get to the 76ers, who added Paul George and Eric Gordon. Do they have the best big three in the NBA? That'll be the question for the other side. First, we tell you about our sponsors. Fellas, do you want your grooming routine to be a one-and-done deal? Well, the days of using the same trimmer for your face and your private parts are over, thanks to our friends at Manscaped. They've come up with the ultimate package to keep your hairs trimmed from 12 to 6, introducing the Beard and Balls Bundle from the Lawnmower 5.0 and the Beard Hedger. That's right, 2 different blades that come in a package now in a bundle, the Beard and Balls Bundle here. Manscaped is not just below-the-belt grooming. They also offer you all types of men's grooming, including the beard trimmer. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ALLNBA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping when you use that code ALLNBA at manscaped.com for a premium grooming experience. Trust Manscaped. Also, it's summertime. I want to tell you about Shady Rays. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor activities. I'm telling you, this weekend for 4th of July, going up to the lake, doing a little boating. I've got my boating glasses. Only wear them one time a year when I'm out on the boat. Shady Rays, courtesy of Shady Rays. So you can get sunglasses for every activity, every situation, formal, casual, athletic, whatever it is you're going for. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. And they probably even have a pair in your favorite team's colors, if that's the angle you want to go. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use AC35. That's 35% off polarized sunglasses when you use the code AC35. Try for yourself the shades that are rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. All right, back here, segment 2. Let's move on to the next team here, Legs. 76ers made a big splash. Long rumored that they were targeting him even during the finals. You remember Joel Embiid kind of doing the side-eye thing, saying that's who they want. Let's pull up the graphic here. They've get Paul George, Eric Gordon, and Andre Drummond. Out the door is Nick Batum, Tobias Harris, DeAnthony Melton. Let's just start with Paul George. How does he fit in with the 76ers?
Man, oh man, I'm so torn on this one. Paul George is a significant upgrade in talent from what they had. They finally got out from the Tobias Harris contract. Paul George, because of his ball handling ability, playmaking ability, is just a different level player at that wing spot. So certainly the talent level's better. He's going to require the ball more earlier than Tobias Harris did, certainly. So that's an interesting effect on Tyrese Maxey, Embiid, and how they're going to operate their offense. He gives you an insurance policy for Embiid when he misses 15 to 20 games in the regular season, which he is guaranteed to do. And you can pencil that in. He's going to miss 20 games or more at some point. Last year they were sub 500 in those games. That affects you overall in an Eastern Conference that is got Boston, New York improved. You've got Orlando, I think, got better. You've got Indiana in the mix, right? It's that seeding matters, man. There's regular season wins in terms of tiebreakers and all kinds of stuff that's going to come into play. So to be able to weather the storm a lot better without Embiid, that's important, I think, in the regular season. For me, this entire thing comes down to assuming they fit. And like you don't notice any sort of a negative effect on Maxey because it's not going to affect Embiid. Maxey's the guy. Assuming that's fine, there's no issue there. This whole thing comes down to: do you expect Paul George to be able to thrive in the environment that Philadelphia creates for their basketball team in the postseason? because I'm just telling you, and yeah. I say this in a way that, because I've had such close ties to the city all these years, I'm saying it kind of in a positive way in that they want it so badly. The pressure, we're 40 plus years in a city that is one of the best basketball cities in the country. Okay, college and pro, and they've had one title. They've had no title since 1983. 40 plus years. Okay, so they're you can feel the pressure and the anxiety build every year when the playoffs start. And it's melted guys. Okay. So And Paul George has had an inconsistent playoff track record. And that's my concern. So this might be something where in the regular season, we might all be loving it. At some point, they might really hit their stride. You're like, wow, that's a lot of talent, man. You got the point guard position covered, which is important in this league. You got a big man that might be the most dominant individual scoring force in this league. And now you've got a top shelf wing scorer. You got all three areas of the floor covered with elite level talent. Wow. And they hit their roll, man. At some point they win 10 straight and it looks like, wow, the Sixers are going to challenge Boston and everything else. You won't know anything until you get into a tight spot in the postseason. And that's what this is all, because Embiid's had issues in the past. I don't worry about Maxey. He seems like he's just cut differently. Like he doesn't think about that stuff. Paul George and Embiid, I think it's fair. These are fair points just based on their history. Embiid's, a lot of it had to do with injuries, but he still did not play well on nights when they absolutely had to have it. And Paul George has had those issues too, in Oklahoma City and with the Clippers. So for me, that's what this whole thing's about. So I'll get your opinion. Do you buy in that he will be the difference maker for the Philadelphia 76ers to finally, in the Joel Embiid era, see at least a conference final, if not potentially challenge the Celtics for overall supremacy in the East and maybe make the finals? Do you think this does that for them?
I can't go that far just because I think the Celtics were so dominant this year. They're bringing their guys back. So I still think you're chasing. I think there's a team in the tier of their own and everybody else has to prove it before you put them in there. But here's what I think about this move. I like the fit 1-3-5. I like that you have a point guard, a small forward, and a center. I always think that's the best. If you're going to put together a big three, that's the best way to do it. You all kind of occupy different spots in the court, different responsibilities. The thing that I think Paul George is phenomenal. I'm higher on Paul George than most people. I know all of his flaws that are more almost personality and can he handle it flaws. But as a player, I just love his defense. I love his shooting. I love his ball handling. He's got so many talents. Here's the thing I think about the 76ers, and I thought it last year, even when Embiid was healthy and was the clear MVP favorite. The way he plays, to me, does not necessarily maximize the team's flexibility. I always think that him and Maxey, early on in the season, I thought they had a great two-man game, and the team kind of skewed even more and more towards Embiid's game and away from the two-man game of them. When now you add a third piece, my question is, what are they going to be trying to develop throughout the course of the year? If you develop a great Maxey Embiid two-man game and a great Paul George Embiid two-man game, and maybe even a great Maxey Paul George two-man game, then I would say I love it. If that is their goal going into the season, how do we not just make each other individually dominant, but how do we find a two-man game between us? I think that the pieces are there for that to happen. That's one of my big criticisms of Joel Embiid is he gets hot and it's almost like, just feed me. Everybody get out of the way and just feed me. And that really works in the regular season. He's one of the best all time at that. But to me, the season is all about cultivating that flexibility to win multiple different ways and with multiple two-man games. And if they do that, they'll be very good.
I think it's great analysis on your part. I really do. And I think that's why this is not the kind of thing that you can definitively be an expert on when this happens. Like, we don't know. We don't. Right. I know what it looks like relative to last year's team. He's better than what they had. And Paul George is really smooth, really talented player. And I really like Paul George. Like, personally, like there's a lot of positive things to say about him. And he guards, like, he plays both ends. He's certainly a better defensive player than Tobias Harris. So you pick up that as well. So I really like it on paper. I've got to see what this looks like, man. I've got to see how this fits, how it works. One thing I do like about this, the Sixers were, I think, bottom 5 in the league last year on catch and shoot across the board. Attempts, makes, percentage. Paul George can catch and shoot last year is 46% from the three. So, and there's going to be opportunities, obviously, with Embiid, with Maxey's speed and what that could create. He's going to get, more opportunities where it looks like it's going in than Tobias Harris ever did at that spot. So to me, this is something that's going to be a work in progress. I'll tell you this. I will say this. I'm more than any fan base kind of connected to the Philadelphia fan base because like all of my friends are Sixers fans. Yeah. And just in general, man, like social media stuff I look at and everything else, it's very heavily Philly based. I'm paying attention to that stuff all the time. I wasn't sensing a tremendous level of excitement over this at all.
That's crazy to me. That's crazy.
And
I'm excited. I think it's a very good
yeah,
and entertaining team. It has question marks, but I'm excited.
you know what it is, man? Yeah, I really think, and it could be, so that maybe this was a little bit misleading what I just said. And what this really could be is this: Phillies, Phillies are rolling. Football's around the
Oh,
corner.
okay.
Football's around the corner, right? Everybody knows how this city feels about the Eagles. The Sixers season's a ways off. It was another typical, here we
Yeah.
go again, Sixers season. And I
Yeah.
just think, I don't know what it would take at this point. I don't know what it would take or who it would take to get their juices flowing, where they would
Right.
start really legitimately think. And oh, by the way, also the city and the team that they probably hate the most just won the championship. So it's just like all of that
Basketball's
stuff
out of mind.
combined.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bury it.
add it all up, and I just think they're kind of like,
Yeah.
that's just why enjoy the Phillies right now, who are really,
Gotcha.
really good. And then the Eagles are around the corner. Before you know it, we'll be in training camp for the Eagles, and then their season starts. This is so far off, and they've given us very little to be excited that they're a legitimate threat. So let's revisit this around Christmas. That's what I think the what I'm actually picking up. But usually, a big name like this comes to your city in the summer, like this time of year, like free agency just started. This is one of the big names, and you got them. You would have thought there'd be a lot more exuberance, and I just wasn't sensing it.
The thing I would fear about this, my last note here is, Daryl Morey, I think traditionally, and look, this is a different team, but I think traditionally has enjoyed the thing we were just talking about with Klay Thompson. Put some guys that are great shooters in the corner, and now you've got Eric Gordon, by the way. So you add another shooter that can stand above the break and knock deep threes. You got Paul George. Does he just get relegated to corner 3-point shooter? Even if he does, it's still great spacing around Maxey driving and Embiid posting up. So you should have a lot of spacing. They lost Nick Batum, who I thought was a very good connective piece for him. Maybe they don't value that because this game is going to almost get simplified in a way to where you just have spacing around two players doing their thing. But then they also lost Tobias Harris, which might be addition by subtraction, quite frankly. I think his time had run its course there. So for me, I look at this and I go, Eric Gordon and Paul George give you some reliable 3-point spacing, and that's why I think there's a high floor to it. But the ceiling right now should be championship, and that question will all just come down to how they develop as a style.
And one last thing on it, just to put a bow on the Sixers. They also signed Andre Drummond.
Yep.
They re-signed Kelly Oubre at a bargain basement number.
Yep.
So that they got to be thrilled about that because Oubre played well for them. And he likes to guard. Like he's committed defender and he can score. So they got him back at a really palatable number for the organization. They bring in Andre Drummond, on the cheap for a veterans minimum. And now you got that massive size on the court at all times if you want to go that route. So look, overall, you have to feel better about the Sixers now than when the season ended, right? There's no question about it. You feel better about them next year. And I think they are the team that might be like the biggest X factor in the East in terms of let's revisit this when we've seen this for 20-25 games. You're going to have a much better feel of where they are relative to the Celtics. And that's the same thing we could say about 2 or 3 other teams because that is the measuring stick. And Philadelphia, I think they closed some ground on the Boston Celtics. The question is, how do the Sixers stack up now with really the Knicks, the Magic, like those teams that are Indiana, those teams that are going to be vying for that second spot in the Eastern Conference? That's really what we're talking about here. And we won't know that until we get closer to camp and then in the beginning stages of the season.
Let's move on now to Oklahoma City, who we talked about them last week, but they made another move. My favorite move of the whole offseason, legs, adding Isaiah Hartenstein. They, of course, added Alex Caruso. We talked about that the other day. They lose Josh Giddey. They lose Lindy Waters. Not a lot there. And then they re-signed Isaiah Joe, 4 years, $48 million. Aaron Wiggins, 5 for $47. They get some of those middle-of-the-road contracts that can be very tradable. I like Isaiah Joe. But adding Hartenstein here, so the MO for this team, legs, has been that they've had Chet Holmgren as an undersized center, but a great shot blocker, but he's not quite big enough to battle the big guys. And they've had this lots of spacing with all these drivers. They're probably not going to be able to get away with that now. You're going to play Hartenstein at 5 and Chet at 4 a lot, although you will have a lot of staggered options where only one of them is on the court. But it looks like your starting lineup will feature both of those guys. So how does that change things for them? Do you think this is going to completely change their personality now having a true center?
I don't think so. One of the things I love about Hartenstein is that you don't have to run a single thing for him. You don't have to run anything for him. Like, there's nothing you got to put in. The ball's not going to the post and kind of standing around. You don't have to put in any action designed to give him the ball in certain spots. He is incredible at finding open pockets for that little touch push shot that he's got off penetration, and then he pounds the offensive glass.
Yeah.
So he creates opportunities for himself. He's a committed screen diver. He's one of those guys that will do it 50 times a game hard, even if he doesn't touch the ball. That's very rare. It's why he became an icon in New York, man.
Multiple dives, by the way, because some guys will run one pick and roll hard, and it's like, I'm done. He'll do it 4 or 5 times in one possession, full speed.
Yep. And the only other guy in the league, I think, that's in that category with that level of effort on the screen dive, not touching the ball, is Rudy Gobert. Gobert will do it 2-3 times on the same trip. Hartenstein does that kind of thing as well. Look, it's definitely going to be a different look for them with that much size on the court at the same time. And rebounding was a problem for them. It was something we were worried about. They addressed it, and they addressed it in a way that he's not just a guy that's on the court to protect the rim and rebound. He's not that. He can score. He can put the ball in the basket. He's got great touch and feel on the other end of the floor. Holmgren is versatile enough defensively that he's going to be able to spend a little bit more time on the perimeter, and you're not going to get beat up that bad. With Hartenstein more patrolling the lane and the rim and a little bit more physical in there, so he's got more brawn. I absolutely love what Oklahoma City has done between adding Caruso and Hartenstein. The level of just competitive toughness now that they've taken it up 2 notches by adding those guys and retained a couple key pieces in Joe and Wiggins. I love Oklahoma City's offseason so far, and this team was the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. But it was clear they weren't ready to make that kind of a run against the teams you were going to have to beat. And this absolutely makes it more of a legitimate vibe. Because I never, as you know, I never really ever said Oklahoma City was capable of winning the Western Conference.
Right.
All year. I never felt that way. And I know that probably made some people in Oklahoma City upset with me, but that's okay. As it turns out, I was right. They lost to Dallas. And that was that. So they weren't ready. They weren't deep enough. They probably weren't ripe enough. And I thought they needed to improve some areas of their team. They have done that in a big way. Now I think they've pushed they've pushed themselves into that conversation where now it's legitimate. Like, they're a legitimate threat to win the West as we sit here on July 2nd.
I think that they look phenomenal. Are they going to look phenomenal? And I'm with you. I think they're the clear favorite now in the Western Conference. They got 2 players to me that answer questions that they had. Not just good players, but it's like, nope, that fills an exact need that you have. They were already good. All of their core players, every single one of them should better next year. When you talk about, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams should be better. Even Dort should be better. Chet Holmgren should be better. I just look at them and I say they're the clear favorites now to me heading into the season, and I think they're going to be a tough one in the West. All right, the last team that we have here, Orlando. They added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They re-signed Gary Harris and Goga Bitadze. But this is a funny graphic because it's only the one player, but KCP was the finishing piece twice to a roster, once with the Lakers and then once, of course, with the Denver Nuggets. I don't know if we're looking at Orlando as a team that is as close to the doorstep as those 2 teams were when KCP arrived, but they're not that far off. They're a team that's already on the ascent. They have a good young core. They needed shooting while maintaining their defense. And I look at that and I go, I really like him there. I think that's a guy that makes the difference. He takes you up one whole level, and they were on the doorstep of that, like, not favorites, but contenders. I think this raises them up into that second tier in the Eastern Conference that'll be chasing the Boston Celtics.
I agree with you. So they last year, started off hot. I was pretty skeptical as to how long is this going to last. It turns out, just watching their team as the year went on, they played well together. They have a legitimate star player to build their offense around, a pretty good secondary player. They weren't ready to make that kind of leap, but look, they had a 7-game series in the first round. This was a team that stayed in there. We kept waiting for them to fall off. They never did. A lot of it had to do with they play defense every possession and they play well together. I kept saying repeatedly, like, I wish they had a legitimate natural point guard, because I think they've got like 4 combo guards on their roster. Suggs is the closest, but he's not a natural point guard. And he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. So he brings that to the table. And he got better offensively as the year went on. It's amazing to think that a role player, which is what KCP is. I mean, I don't necessarily use that term all the time the way other people will. He's a role player, man. And very few times are you going to see a guy change teams that have like his numbers that you think can have this big of an impact. And I actually do. That's how much he means. The winning that he has experienced to this point in his career, the guys he has played with, the culture of the organizations he's been with that won, that alone is going to bring so much to the Orlando Magic, a young team trying to find what their ceiling's going to be, a year older, year more mature next year. And now you bring in a guy like this that plays that hard defensively. You put Suggs and KCP on the court, that's arguably the best defensive backcourt in the NBA.
They already had combos like that were just tenacious, but now you have one that can also shoot the ball, which I think is part of why this helps so much.
Exactly. That's the thing. And he's not a stiff on the other end. He can go down there and contribute on that end as well. He's got great energy about him. He's a pro. The way he competes, great addition for the Orlando Magic. And I love that they went out and they targeted a winner that fits their culture and weren't just trying to throw money around. They said, you know what, we want this kind of guy on our team. And it's a big loss for Denver, man. And as you can tell, I know you know more than anybody, the reaction to him leaving Denver has been pretty substantial. Like people are pretty upset about that. Right. And there's a reason. And that's why Orlando targeted him and they got him.
So here's how I would frame it with KCP. When you're a team like Orlando that's hasn't made it over the hump yet, you're an on the rise team. It could break a couple different ways. You never get over the hump. You're that team that kept climbing but never quite got there, and then it's over. The window closes. To get over the hump, you need winners. You need guys, one, that have been there before to kind of show you the next step. Let me shepherd you guys here on what we need to do to get there, but also just have the talent and the skill. And to me, I look at that and I go, Orlando was not a surefire thing to keep going. They could be a team that just hit a ceiling and never got past that ceiling. But now I would bet on them to make the leap that a team like Indiana did last year. To me, they're in that tier with Cleveland and Milwaukee and Indiana. Teams that are very good, but we're waiting on to see if they can be great, if they can be that level. They've vaulted up to that. And look, they just went to a game 7 against the Cavs, so you could argue they were already in that tier. But for me, I look at it and I say they're more firmly in that tier now where they can challenge the top teams and maybe have a Cinderella run the way the Knicks did, the Pacers did, and get to a situation where anything's possible. So I love that move for him. I think it's a great fit. And it's going to be a move that I think pays dividends, not just for the time he's there, but possibly for years to come. All right, we got a couple super chats, Emma. What do we have? Victor Bello says, here's a little money to help Adam buy his new Hartenstein jersey. There we go. We're $5 closer. Emma, you get me the price on that Hartenstein jersey. We're $5 closer. I think I'm probably about $100 away still.
I know which one. I know which one. I could already tell. You've already been looking. You want that powder blue OKC 55. I know that's what you're looking for, man.
Pretty jersey, man. I'll rock it this summer league.
No, they got that great colors, man. No doubt. Hey, he's moved geographically closer to you. So let's see. Let's see.
I'll actually tell you this. I am worried because you make a prediction. I make a prediction. I'm worried Denver's going to lose in the playoffs because of Hartenstein. Like, it might be the difference, man. The worst way to be right when you're right and it ends up costing your own team. All right, what else do we have, Emma? Teddy Wayman says, what are your thoughts on the Jazz and Lauri Markkanen? Should they trade him or build around him? Thanks, guys. Interesting question actually here from Teddy. Rumored to that, they would be willing to move off from him. Maybe they're too far away from a rebuild to think they can get there in his time. What do you think, Legs?
I think that's probably what it is. They just look at the landscape in the West where they are currently and don't think that's something that's viable in his prime years, and the amount of money down the road you have to commit to him to build around him when that might not be enough. It's probably what they're thinking is. I mean, it's a shame because I love the guy, and there are teams, his name comes up in certain rumors with certain teams, and your head starts to spin a little bit thinking about, man, adding Lauri Markkanen like to teams that are close. That could be the absolute piece to put them over the top. So let's keep an eye on that and see what happens.
Is there a spot you think you would really love to see him, if not Utah?
Oh man, top of my head, I have to think about that. It kind of caught me off guard.
I've heard Sacramento's name mentioned. New Orleans maybe, or The team that I would really think would work great would be Minnesota if you swapped him in Karl Anthony Towns' spot. They both shoot the three, they both do similar things, but he's more of a true stretch. But
I look at, what it is, Adam, these names come up, and I'm going to be honest, any of these guys on this level, first thing I always think about, I start scouring the East. Yeah, I start scouring the Eastern Conference because the West is just so tough, man. And you're just like, okay, you just got to change, from one team to another in the West, and like other teams added guys too. I'd always look at the East as there being an opportunity. I know the Celtics are over there, but in terms of, hey, adding a piece that at least gets you into the running for maybe being that last team to take the Celtics on, because we know nobody's going to close that gap in the offseason or through the draft, or no one's going to do that with the Celtics right now. But there's still certainly less potholes in the East that you have to navigate as opposed to the Western Conference. So that's when you said it to me, I started immediately thinking about Eastern Conference teams. Right.
All right. Well, that does it for today. Cue that outro music. Tomorrow, I expect some more deals. I sure hope some more deals come through. This has been a very stunted, I feel, a very stunted and slow free agency period, but hopefully some things pick up here in the next 24 hours. Either way, we'll start grading some of the teams that made big moves and talk about that on the other side. And then, of course, we're only a week away from heading down to Summer League. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Do us a favor. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of what we talked about today, what teams you want to hear us talk about, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss a show. We'll see you on the other side.
We all silly like the mayor.